Games today are worse than they used to be. I'm saying it, y'all know what I'm talking about, y'all have seen the videos. Gaming isn't fun anymore, usually with a Minecraft thumbnail, usually with a Wojak thumbnail, something like that. I haven't watched a single one of those videos, to be completely honest with you. However, what I have seen is all the responses on Twitter in the vein of, maybe you should expand your horizons a little bit. Now, aside from any sort of rational arguments on either side, we will get into that. Can we just say that that is a really annoying way, really pretentious, annoying, smarmy way to respond to literally anything? Can we just say that? Can we just say that that's not productive and not engaging with the actual argument? Okay, good. But more than anything, I want to say, okay, I'm siding with the Minecraft Zoomers on this one. I'm siding with the Fortnite, Call of Duty Zoomers on this one. I don't care. Let me give a small correction. The one video that I have seen, and that's the one that kind of sparked it, was this one that went viral on Twitter. I'm assuming it was originally on TikTok, about this guy looking at it from a pretty normie perspective, going to the point that he said, okay, I don't want to play a turn-based RPG like Baldur's Gate. I realize that that's a very acclaimed game, but it just doesn't appeal to me. And using that as an argument for the vastness of things available to play kind of doesn't hold up. And he took this kind of interesting perspective that I hadn't seen before on sports games, just looking at what the variety was like among even just a single sport. Back in the day, you had the sort of trendier, arcadier variants. Even among the same publisher, you had multiple kind of choices. Now, there is an inclination to just cite a million examples and then think that proves your point, right? There's no objective point at which you've proven the point just by citing examples, just by citing a certain number of examples. I think it's really easy to overwhelm the other person with like 10 sports games and then think that proves your point. I don't want to go down that route. I know nobody's really convinced by that. I think that also explains the miscommunication between that crowd and the Expand Your Horizons crowd. There's really no accounting for the difference in taste and the broadness of taste or the types of things that are being catered to. I think it's, on a base level, it's realistic to say that, okay, maybe different eras, maybe different time periods of art cater to different types of people. You could look at music and say, okay, hip-hop is the dominant genre right now, and if you don't really care for hip-hop, maybe that would cause you to not follow music very much, because none of the popular things that are really talked about, that stand out, that are really big in the conversation, appeal to you. But then that doesn't mean that there's not stuff for you to listen to, right? I think if the Expand Your Horizons crowd is valid with games, then it's especially valid with mediums like music. Hey, maybe you are just not looking for the right thing. Maybe you're just not looking hard enough. By the way, if you want to see me talk about all the crazy games I'm picking to play every month for myself to clear off of my backlog, I actually have a show for that now called Backlog Battle. You can watch it for $5 a month on kofi.com/ziadbra. The link is in the description. There's also a free first episode on my channel. Please check it out. If I get enough people subscribing, I might have enough money to quit my job and do this full time. That'd be kind of awesome. Thank you. However, none of that is what I want to talk about. I think what that video illustrated really nicely, instead, maybe inadvertently so, is the concrete ways that the industry has changed. And I think trying to deny that is at least a little bit out of touch. I think we all understand, okay, the perfect example that I always go to is a studio like Naughty Dog, who used to, without fail, release a game every 2 years. And guess what? Now, these days, with current budgets, with current development timelines, with current schedules, we're probably about to go the entire PS5 generation without their next game. It's probably going to hit toward the end of that generation. It's probably going to be a crossplay title as well. Sorry about that noise, that was my camera. This is just such a widely reported fact that AAA budgets are untenable. I don't think any single person would disagree with this, right? I don't think anybody would disagree with the idea that gaming has genuinely changed in that way. That if you set out to make a game under the publisher system, under the traditional studio owned by publisher, studio backed by publisher, major release system, you're setting out, number one, for maybe a 4 to 5 year endeavor, probably. And it's a game where a certain scope is expected, reasonably speaking. Consider how something like Armored Core 6 feels like a relative outlier in the current landscape. It's a game from an established developer who made a name for themselves with these big open adventures, and now suddenly they're pivoting back to a straightforward action game that's level-based, stage-based, linear, whatever. I feel like it's really only a couple isolated developers like From Software, like Capcom, that can even manage a pivot like that. Everybody else either is gone or about to die, see Bungie, or they feel very compelled to do something with a more adventurous scope, let's say. Now, when those major studios either have to pivot really hard toward bigger and more homogenous games with more and more sort of standardized expected features, or they go away completely in the worst case scenario, where does that leave games on the scope of, I don't know, Jak 2? For some reason, that's the first one that I always think of. Where does that leave stuff like GTA clones, or stuff like the Splinter Cell games that came up in that video, stuff like platformers by Sega that are actually trying to compete with Nintendo? I mean, even the fact that Sega are currently making a new Virtua Fighter, that seemed so inconceivable, because at least to me, there was always the question of, okay, who would even make this? Because they've consolidated all their studios toward Yakuza and toward Sonic, to the point that there's really nobody else left. You kind of have to outsource or collaborate or do some other shenanigans. I think the only ones at Sega that are holding it down in terms of arcade design is the Hatsune Miku guys. You even see this, as much as I glaze them, and as much as I do feel like they have a healthy variety of scopes and experiences, you even see this with Nintendo. Consider that after Metroid Fusion, I believe R&D 1, which was the handheld Metroid team, they sort of merged into other bigger parts of the company, and from that point forward, it was basically impossible for Sakamoto, the Metroid producer, who had still always been there. He was still always around at Nintendo. He clearly had pull to make stuff happen, and still, he couldn't actually find a developer to make the freaking game. He couldn't find a developer to make a new 2D Metroid. It wasn't until they had the collaboration with Mercury's team and Samus Returns that was possible again. I think this is sort of a big story with Nintendo in general. They've, over the course of their life, have moved more and more toward collaborations, and the boundaries between their teams are more and more fluid. It's often really hard to say who exactly is making any particular game at Nintendo. Now, again, remember the question that I asked? Okay, where does that smaller scope of game go? I want to say indies are not picking up the slack. We do have much more democratic game development, and I think that is great. It's much easier to release a game. It's much easier to not have to abide by the publisher system. Again, sort of a similar situation to the music industry, the gatekeepers, streaming, open it up. On the one hand, that's cool. On the other hand, a lot of those smaller types of games, think something like Star Fox, that would have been a major AAA release for a company like Nintendo. That would have been something they put their most talented developers behind to work on for a substantial amount of time, with cutting edge technology, all that jazz. Now that same type of game has to be tackled by a single person, realistically, in an indie capacity. Can we really ignore the fact that those types of games, those types of scopes are just not tenable with AAA budgets? Can we not just admit that? I think that is objectively so hard to deny. And you could say, well, they still sort of exist, again, with the indies, but like, it's not, again, not to knock indies, but it's not the same. I don't know, I feel like there's a tendency to look at the release calendar and see, oh my god, there's this flood of games with vastly different aesthetics and vastly different styles and vastly different genres coming out. But then how many of those actually stand the test of time the same way all those classics back in the day that had major publisher backing behind them? I don't want to... This sounds like I'm glamorizing the throes of capitalism. I'm not. I guess what I'm trying to say is that no amount of expanding my horizons will bring those styles back to the forefront, will make me actually satisfied with games as I was in, I don't know, the 6th or 7th console generation. I feel like if I transplanted my current self with my current tastes and sensibilities into the 90s or into the 2000s or into the 2010s even, it would be an embarrassment of riches. I wouldn't even be able to comprehend the amount of cool games to play versus now. I'm gonna flash the legendary PS2 2001 lineup. Consider how many of those games have modern equivalents. How many of those games can you really confidently say, yeah, that style is being served today? That is like something where I feel totally happy with the current landscape. There's so many more cans I could open with that. I could say, well, okay, the current trends that are being served, a lot of it is leaning toward big open games, progression systems, roguelikes, whatever. That's like really anecdotal. That's something I'm not comfortable getting on a rant about without more statistical evidence, which I'm too lazy to gather. But I think even if y'all are expand your horizons type of guys, I think if you're honest with yourself, you can admit that there's something there. There's something to what I'm saying. Now, to everybody who feels similarly, if you also feel gaming isn't fun anymore, I actually don't agree with that either. The real take is that, hey, there's actually enough to play. If you look across the vast history of the medium, which actually is not even that vast, right? There's a ridiculous amount of things to get into and to sink your teeth in. They could stop releasing games today, and I think I would still have enough to play until the day I die. A couple friends and I, we regularly hold tournaments for games across history, fighting games that are maybe not being played super actively anymore, score attack arcade games, that sort of thing. It's kind of crazy to think about how many of those things you could really get into, really get a lot of depth out of if you just create the environment for it, if you just disconnect from the modern release circus and actually focus on things that would hit your taste, expand your understanding of the medium. I feel like I get so much more out of grinding something like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 a little bit, something like Nex Machina for a little bit, than playing the latest indie narrative adventure game. I don't know. Yeah, do I have a point with that? Do you agree? Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I should expand my horizons? Do you think this will ever get better? Do you think the games industry will implode and then eventually will be led into a new era of arcade goodness? There's no way that's gonna happen. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe, like, all that nonsense. That does help me out. Peace.